As journalists, we depend on people like Michael and Stella and Amanda to tell their stories. Their stories also remind us that every family is touched by mental health issues. Nobody goes untouched by these issues. But then again, as journalists, we don't cover normalcy. We don't cover our normal everyday lives. We're drawn to the spectacular. So what do we do when we cover mental illness? I'll give you some examples of stuff I've covered over the last few years. A man who decapitates and cannibalizes a stranger on a Greyhound bus. A middle-class couple that poisons their 3 children and slits their wrists as part of a New Year's Eve murder-suicide pact. That's the kind of things we cover. That's not the reality of mental illness for everyone. It's the bizarre end. We're going to do that stuff. We're not going to stop doing it, so how do we do it well? I think what we have to do is try to put it into some context. And the context of those stories that I think doesn't get covered enough is that all the people I mentioned had one thing in common. They all had untreated mental illness. And that's, to me, the biggest health issue in Canada today. We don't treat mental health issues the way we do physical health issues. A lot of people suffer with mental health issues, suffer from stigma. But I'm not convinced that the way to avoid stigma is not writing about these cases. Some people have made that argument. Don't write about the violent people because it gives the message that all people are violent. No, it doesn't. It tells us that untreated people are at much greater risk of being violent. That's what it tells us. To me, the worst thing we can do is to speak about mental illness in hushed tones and whispered implications. I think we have to speak about mental illness as openly and fully as possible. And I think that's our real challenge, is writing news that's both informative and respectful, and that doesn't perpetuate stigma and prejudice. And the reason we see more people with mental illness on the streets than in the suburbs is because of the socio-economic impact. When people start getting sick, it does affect their job, their ability to get educated, and that's why they end up poor. It's not poor people who have more mental illness, it's mental illness causing poverty. Mental illness costs the Canadian economy about $51 billion a year. By 2020, according to the World Health Organization, depression will be the leading cause of disability on the planet. So the issue is getting worse, it's not getting better. About 18% of workers in Canada have had a diagnosis of clinical depression. 8% of workers on any given day are taking medications for mental health conditions. You heard it over and over again that the vast majority of people with mental illness, about 3 million Canadians on any given day, are suffering actively. Very, very tiny percentage of them are violent. The reality is they work, they have families, they go to school, they're active members of their community, they play roller derby, whatever. That's the reality. So I hope I've given you a sense of some of the challenges about writing a mental illness, some of the economic impacts. And I'm going to stop there, and if there's more questions during the question period, I'd be happy to entertain them. So thank you.